Whenever you talk, there are natural pauses, like that one just now. So you speak a sentence, and then there's a pause as you prepare to say the next thing. Like that pause there. A great public speaker will use pauses to emphasize a point that they've just made. You can't just keep talking without ever pausing. That could quickly get tiresome to your listeners, so there's no way that you'd want to do that because that would lessen the impact of what you're trying to say. You see what I mean? The interesting thing is that many songs use this same method. You'll hear a phrase and then a pause. So, for example, the famous song Misty starts out like this. Look at me. And now there's a pause, and that gives you a chance to think about what you just heard. Look at me. Okay, what about me? Why should I look at you? Or there's another pause. Or another famous song. I get a kick out of you, but that first line, I get no kick from champagne. Okay, why? There's a pause. Now, another famous song, I like to use this one a lot. There's another pause. Gives you a chance to think about what you just sang. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. And now you're thinking about it and going, well, what about you? Well, the next line fills that in. So now when you listen to a song, start listening for those pauses. And those pauses are a place where you can insert a run or a fill. When you're playing the song, you want to add something in there to fill in the space and do so in an interesting way. What's the difference between a run and a fill? Well, those are rather loose terms. So generally a run will be something like a scale, some kind of single note figure, and a fill may be more like a broken chord, an arpeggio, maybe even a series of chords. These are not hard and fast definitions. Basically, I just kind of lump it all together. Runs and fills. It's stuff that you put in when there's a pause in the song. Here's where your knowledge of scales and arpeggios will come in handy. You can add runs. You can add fills when you're playing as a soloist. Also, you can do it when you're accompanying a singer or an instrumentalist who's playing the tune. Now, the technique is a little different depending on whether you're playing as a soloist or playing as an accompanist. Now we're going to start with you as a soloist. You're playing a song and you come to a pause in the song and you want to add something. Well, what do? Well, let's switch to the overhead camera so that you can more clearly see some of the examples that I'm about to show you. And by the way, these are not the only types of runs and fills you can do. It's only limited by your imagination, by your technical ability, by your knowledge of chords and so on. So let's see what are some of the runs and fills that we can put into some well-known songs. Let's start with one of my old standbys, the famous hymn, Amazing Grace. And we'll play it here in the key of G. Now we're playing as a soloist, and I'm going to show you some examples. And I haven't planned this out ahead of time, so whatever comes to mind is what I'm going to show you, because that's how it often works when you're playing runs and fills. You don't have them written out. You just think, what can I do to fill that space that will be tasteful and fit with the song? So here we go. You're playing the first part of the song. And we're coming up to the pause. What can we do there? We can play an arpeggio. Something very simple like that. I'll demonstrate that again. Notice I kind of rolled the chord and then added an arpeggio. Now you can get a little more fancy. Remember how we studied arpeggios? You can just play, and these are like triplets, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Or we could use a 7th chord in there. Or I can use better fingering. Now, you don't only have to play it going up. A lot of different things you can do there. Of course, you can also play arpeggios in your left hand. Then your right hand kind of takes over. Any number of things. I'm just using arpeggios at this point. What about scales? What can we do using sort of a scale fill? Of course, now we're not really ending up on the melody, so let's try something else. The interesting thing is you could start on almost any note on any beat and still make it work. So there I had to add a triplet to get to that note in time. Getting a little bit fancy there. And of course, you can always play a scale coming down. As you can see, there's a lot of possibilities. You can actually combine a scale and an arpeggio. Or an arpeggio and a scale. You can also use something that's not necessarily either one, some type of figure in there. Those are just some examples of what you can do filling in that space in Amazing Grace. Let's try that other song that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, which is Misty. So we end up on this E-flat major 7 chord, and we can actually just play an arpeggio in that space. The thing about this song is you can really play with the time in this song. You don't have to play it like you're playing to a metronome or a click track. Almost forgot how it went. And then we have another pause here. And notice, I'm actually really playing what looks like a C minor arpeggio. But we have this A flat and E flat in the bass. That looks like a G minor arpeggio, but it's really the top notes of an E flat major 7th chord. You can also just play solid chords. That's a nice fill as well. You can also play the arpeggio coming down. As you can see, once again, the possibilities are quite endless. There, if you know your E flat major scale. Now, sometimes you can add a fill when the chord is changing during the pause. So remember, we played a little bit of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Here, you don't necessarily have to stay on the C major chord. We can actually go to an A7, which leads us now to this part. Or you can go to an F minor. So what can we do there? There's our diminished arpeggio. One of the neat things about these diminished arpeggios is you can put almost any note in the bass. So here we'll put an A in the bass, and now it's working like an A7 chord, only we have this note instead of we have this. So there's one way that you can do it. Let's take a song that's in 6/8 time. This is another hymn that I like to use as an example. There's our first pause. Now we don't have a lot of time here, so what can we do? Another arpeggio or a scale. So you can see how it can be very helpful to know your arpeggios and your scales. You notice I'm playing an arpeggio in the left hand as well. You can split the arpeggio between two hands. Well, this is just a very brief introduction into what you can do with runs and with fills. So experiment around with some of your favorite songs. I'd love to hear what you come up with. Thanks again for watching, for playing along. I know this is a vast subject that we'll probably come back to because there is so much that you can do to dress up your playing. Plus, we need to talk about how to do this if you are an accompanist, when you no longer have to worry about playing the melody. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave those in the comment section. If you'd like to support my work, you can go to my Patreon page. I will leave the link at the top of the description. Thank you again. I look forward to speaking to you in the next one.